puked like crazy after class?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Today on Rider Jitsu TV, we have Professor Micah Scarbrough. Professor Micah, thank you so much for coming on the show today. The viewers and I really appreciate it.
No worries. Glad to be here.
What does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu mean to you?
Oh, I don't know. I think I have a slightly different view on it than most people. I don't think jiu-jitsu necessarily means anything to me other than it's a tool, for, I guess it's a tool for whatever you want to make it. It's not something that you just comes into your life. You choose to be in it and you make a choice to be in it every time you show up to train, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you want to compete, it's a tool for competition. If you want self-defense, it's a tool for self-defense. That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Seems like it's different for everyone. So
Yeah. I don't think it's when people say something like, jiu-jitsu did this for me. I kind of get weird about it because to me, you're the one showing up to train, right? You're the one that's showing up to make whatever. So I have a student that comes in and he's in his mid 40s. He has no interest in going competitive. What he's interested in is losing weight, and he's a type 2 diabetic. So he's trying to, prevent himself from getting more unhealthy. He's trying to use jiu-jitsu to lose weight and improve his health. So, jiu-jitsu wouldn't do that for him. It doesn't knock on his door and show up and be like, hey man, it's time to deal with your diabetes and your weight problem. He's the one showing up to the gym. He's the one that's putting in the work. He's the one that's trying to lose weight.
yeah, I like that. That's a good excuse me. That's a good mindset to have for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not doing anything for him. He's doing the work.
Tell us about your journey to black belt from kind of when you started till now.
I think I started, I want to say around 2004 or 5. I was working at a Muay Thai gym. I did some Sancho kickboxing before that. And I just want to kind of accent it. Jiu-jitsu at the time wasn't hugely prevalent in the United States. I mean, it was there. It was mostly in the coastal areas like California and New York and things like that. But at the time I was living in Utah, and it was at the gym I was at. It was through a guy who just got his brown belt under Pedro Sauer named Eddie Edmonds. I was injured at the time. I think I had just injured my neck in Muay Thai. So I wanted something a little bit more mellow, which, again, it comes down to how you train, I guess. And so I started doing jiu-jitsu there. Then I started training under one of his affiliate guys from what was called Unified BJJ, which is still in Salt Lake, under a guy named Dana Rizda during the afternoon. So I was kind of going back and forth between those two guys. And then I think after I met my wife, we ended up moving down to a town called Orem or Provo area under a guy named Jason Mertlick, who was the head trainer at I believe at the time it was called Throwdown. Then it switched to the Pit Elevated, and I was still training under Jason Mertlick and Dane. I trained there until my wife and I moved to Texas. And I took about a 5-year break in between because I was coaching gymnastics at the time, competitive gymnastics, got back into it. So I was a blue belt under Paulo Brandao with Gracie Umaita. And I trained from blue belt to brown belt under him. And then my neck injury got re-aggravated. So I took another break. I think that one was about a year or two. And then my wife and I at the time moved out to where we're at now and I started training under Alex Henley, and I got my black belt under him and Brian Marvin.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I had kind of eclectic, started in the gi under Throwdown and Pit Elevated. I went no gi for a majority of the time, kind of focused on I never competed MMA, but it was an MMA kind of focus in that gym. And then when I switched to Gracie Umaita under Paulo Brandao, it was kind of a mixture between gi and no gi, but way more focused on the gi again, since it's under the Hoyler Gracie. And then swapped over with Alex, and Alex is obviously, you know him, he's got a good mix there as well.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Well,
and that's where we met. This is where this happened,
yes,
right
it is. Gosh.
here, right there. Yeah.
So let me ask you, when you first started training, what was your motivation? Like, what was your mindset behind the reason you wanted to do jiu-jitsu?
When I first started, I was in my 20s. So I was, I just had, I was training Sancho kickboxing at the time. And when I went to the Muay Thai gym, my focus was actually to do Sancho kickboxing. I wanted to go pro. Like, I was a really big fan of Kung Lei and Rudy Ott at the time. I felt like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was a good cross-training tool, so I could understand takedown defense and things like that. Then as things started getting more sanctioned with the UFC and things like that, I was just more interested in the training side of it. I did a couple of grappling competitions in white belt and blue belt where it was no time limit and no submission restrictions and things like that. So at the time I guess I would say I was more of a glorified hobbyist. Like, I would compete every now and then. And then it kind of changed to just a way as I started pushing heavier into competitive gymnastics and coaching that. My schedule got so crazy where I was so focused on training my athletes. I really had no time to train myself, to be like really dedicate myself to the competition scene, especially as the IBJJF became more of the governing body at the time for that. And you started seeing a heavier uptick in the quality of athlete that was going into the IBJJF. I just didn't really have time to do that, since gymnastics, off season, you're training, 6 days a week minimum just to stay competitive. And then during the competition season, you're at work 7 days a week. So it just came a way for me to de-stress, all that good stuff. So I became a glorified hobbyist and downgraded to a hobbyist.
Yeah,
so I guess my jiu-jitsu focus became, all right, I just don't want to let the competitors just run. That was my goal. At purple belt on, my goal was really to not allow the competitors to get too far ahead of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Along the way, have you noticed jiu-jitsu has crossed over into your personal life?
Yeah, as I said before, I'm not saying this, I'm just saying as a fact, I'm just saying in my opinion, it becomes jiu-jitsu becomes someone's religion almost. And I'm not, I don't believe in that. So, when people will say, hey, I'm going to church, and they're talking about open mat, and things like that. To me, it crosses over to your life as much as you want it to, or you let it to. I've actually seen and personally have had jiu-jitsu affect my life very positively, but also very negatively, if that makes sense. To me, I kind of have an old school kind of approach to martial arts, in the sense that I think it should be a tool for self-betterment. If you want to compete and you want to make that pro, I mean, it's only been fairly recently that you can actually make a living as a pro athlete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I wouldn't say that was ever a focus of mine to do this. In fact, opening a gym was, I didn't think I'd be able to make money out of it, if that makes sense. So we're talking about the positive aspects of jiu-jitsu personally. I mean, it's how I make my living now. I've been blessed to have a really good friend come in and open a gym with me. Of course, they're BJJ. It's in Elgin. Check it out. Yeah. And then it's helped me physically. I mean, I'm 42 years old. Yeah. I have the same thing every 42-year-old athlete has. If you wake up and you're feeling good, that probably means you're dead. I got my aches and pains. But I'm not trying to throw my brothers under the bus, but all my biological brothers are overweight. They're overweight by the time they were in their mid 40s. You know, I'm not overweight. I have a very healthy lifestyle because of jujitsu, because I know I
Yeah,
have to show up on the mats. Um,
sure.
it's helped me with work ethic. It's taught me that being in a bad position is only as bad as you allow it to be. And I'm not saying I haven't been subbed or tapped, but in life, jujitsu teaches you, hey, you're down, but you're not out. You might be able to escape. And the other thing is too is that usually a failure doesn't necessarily mean a failure in jujitsu. It means it's a learning opportunity, and it's only as bad as you make it. That being said, since I believe jujitsu is a tool, whenever I focus on it too much and I let other things drop away, like have being a better friend or a better husband, you know what I mean? It's affected my personal relationships if I just focus on jujitsu, you know,
Gotcha.
and, and I'm not by any means attacking anybody that, is a professional athlete in this. I mean, they absolutely need to eat, sleep, this stuff, that's just what it is. But there's, there's an aspect to it where you can't have it all, And so if
Mhm.
you're putting that much emphasis on it, it's very difficult on relationships. It's really difficult at being good at other things. So
Yeah.
that's the best I can say it.
No, I like that answer. It definitely can take over your life.
Yeah. I've seen it. I've seen it with other people. And again, if that's a sacrifice that you want to make, and you accept that, that's you. And that's awesome. I just say communicate that with other people.
Yeah, for sure. Have there been any barriers to your success with jujitsu, or maybe even just martial arts in general?
Yeah, I wouldn't look at. That's actually a pretty good question. Barriers to my success in jiu-jitsu. You know, I came in with I came in with a neck injury already. I had a couple of concussions before before going in, so I was already fairly limited on how much I felt was a smart way of going into it. So when there was an opportunity to kind of, I guess, go pro in BJJ, I was already in my mid 30s, early mid 30s. I already had some concussions and obviously a pretty significant neck injury, and which
Mhm.
I won't lie, training, especially with the style of jiu-jitsu that I like to do, exacerbated. I just had to take care of my neck more, especially being a spotting coach in gymnastics, where you're catching athletes. You know what I mean? Especially on bars, where you have a kid, doing giants around the bar, and if they peel or release, and you're trying to catch them, it's not always like a clean catch. They're
Yeah.
limbs smacking you in the face. My first year spotting, there was a spotting coach dealing with an athlete learning for the first time. Well, I mean, not the first time, but the athlete was putting a round off back handspring double back, which is 2 flips in a row before they land. First time putting it on the floor. So she has all the safety equipment out on the floor. The girl runs out, round off back handspring, sets, really beautiful set, gets halfway through the first rotation and then panics. And so she just X's out, just
Dang.
completely opens up. So the spotting coach's job is to help mitigate the damage, not completely take it away because you can't. But she
Yeah.
goes in there, she tries to catch the kid. The kid tangles up in the body, ends up breaking her jaw and dislocating her shoulder. It was
Yikes.
just, and other gymnastics coaches could sit there and say, well, she wasn't ready for it. Well, I've also seen super high level kids killing movement. It's just what it is, So that's something that was a reality of mine every day. So there was times where, I'd have a kid going into the pit, working a release or something, and I would have to like kill momentum just because the pit's still a very dangerous piece of equipment if they go in wrong. So you're trying to mitigate stuff. They go to peel, you're trying to kill their momentum. They yank on
Hmm.
you. My shoulder, my neck were just like lit up. So there's times where I couldn't get into the gym the way I'd want to. I couldn't train the way I'd want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and
Gotcha.
then yeah, other times, I mean, you're a married man yourself. There's sometimes where, family obligations are like, not rolling with, not rolling with your buddy today. You're no longer the big spoon.
Yeah. Yeah. Been there for sure.
Yep. So I mean, but it's one of those things. You just roll with the punches. You redefine your goal.
Yeah,
Make it happen.
definitely. Things change, and I'm sure it sounds like your jiu-jitsu journey has changed. And it seems like everyone's kind of changes from where they start out, what they want to do or like become. Life takes over, and
Yep. Yeah.
you end up having to take time off and just all the things you don't want to do, but you're forced to do, kind of, I guess.
Yeah. And then aging. I started this in my early mid-20s, and
Hmm.
with age comes not only experience but aches and pains. And your priority shift. Again, being married, my wife she has been at every promotion of mine. She's been she's seen me get my blue belt. She's seen me get all the way up through black belt. She's been there.
Hmm.
I can guarantee you, if you talk to her, like the way I trained and the focus of my training has absolutely changed. Where now, to me, especially with these higher level, even blue belts now, like you look at Nicky Rod, who had a huge wrestling background and then comes into jiu-jitsu and he's like blue belt and he's competing with black belts. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
My focus on jiu-jitsu has completely changed. It's just, you can't be the same athlete you were, especially with
Yeah,
minimum 6 years typically to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Like that 6-year gap, things just change.
yeah, definitely. Okay, let's switch it up a little bit and talk
Let's
about
do it.
leadership.
Leadership.
Black belt.
All right.
As a black belt, what does it mean to you to be a leader in the gym, like your own gym, the gyms you attend, and just the jiu-jitsu community in general?
That's a great question, because it goes back to what your first question is to me. Like, again, jiu-jitsu is a tool. Especially and I don't know how controversial that is. It's the same thing as like if you're a master craftsman, right? And you make, I don't know, let's just say a carpentry, right? You're a master carpenter, and but you don't care about the community around you. You don't care about what kind of product you put out there. It doesn't matter if you're a master at it or not. Like, you're putting out crap. You know what I mean? If you're being selfish with it and all you do is make things for yourself and you're not providing a service to other people, it doesn't matter your level. You know what I mean? You could be the best master craftsman out there. If you're selfish with it or you're using it to leverage something poorly, it doesn't really matter. If that makes sense. I've met and trained with some really, really great people that you would not label them world class, but I've learned so much more from them than someone that isn't, that's motivated for self-interest, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
it does.
at my gym, we work with an outreach community that deals with recovery. And that's as
Cool.
much as I feel comfortable to say on a public forum, but we deal with people that are in recovery. I am not a world-class black belt. I'm not going to lie. I'd like to think I'm a above average hobbyist. But that could just be my ego talking. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but for me, as far as leadership, I don't think with a black belt comes responsibility. Like, it should, but it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, the black belt, all that means is that I spend enough time on the mats, get my face pushed in, and like get twisted
Yeah.
up. So I think jiu-jitsu kind of brings out the best or the worst in people. You know what I mean? You see it all the time, and you're a really good purple belt. You've seen
Thank
it.
you.
You've seen people come in and they have an ego and they have to get a tap, and they
Mm-hmm.
have to get that, like, oh, I caught this guy today. Where I would say the one thing I learned the most from Alex, who is, again, the last guy I got went from brown to black belt with. The one thing I learned the most from him was he would come in and he would kind of have an agenda of what he'd want to do in the training session a day. and I would see him tap to like a purple belt or a blue belt, not because he's not a good black belt, but because he had a specific agenda that day where he would put himself deep into a position and see if he could work out of it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
his blue belts and purple belts compete super well. And so the other thing is too is because he'd put himself in those bad situations and environments, he would get better much faster. You know, so. But that's also a sign of leadership where that takes some humility to be like, I don't have to tap everybody all the time. And you would see that he was getting better so much faster, and he competed super well. You know what I mean? He had top 3 in Europeans, top 3 in worlds. He doesn't do poorly,
Yeah, that's
so,
for sure.
yeah. So, I mean, I guess jiu-jitsu just does kind of like what you think, not really what you think, but kind of what you put into it, So, and as I said, we do an outreach. Those kids, when they come in and they're learning jiu-jitsu, I'm not there telling them to be like an ultimate, go to Ultimate Fighter, or they need to be a competitor. Their jiu-jitsu is about sobriety and recovery and becoming better humans. So
Yep.
will they become top level athletes? Probably not. That's not their focus. Do they need to be? So I guess that's what I mean is like if by leadership you mean someone that's showing up and is trying to be the GOAT and everything like that, okay, that's cool. I mean, what are you providing for other
Well,
people?
yeah, I totally agree with that, and that's a good way to look at it too. From my standpoint, attending your gym, you're definitely a leader just because you are the head coach, and
Yeah.
the people who are in the recovery program, I'm sure, look at you as a leader because you're helping them become better humans in a
Right.
way they probably can't get anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, I
So
guess what I'm trying, I should qualify that. That's a good point. I guess what I'm saying is that as a black belt, people are just going to tend to look at you as a leader. That's just what it is.
yeah,
I think it just depends on. So yeah, that's a good point. I guess what I'm trying to qualify is no matter what you're at, like whatever you're doing as a black belt, that's gonna show, you know. And so jujitsu to me, I'm trying to show that as like it's a tool,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Jujitsu doesn't make you a better person. So what you do with that tool so being a black belt, I guess, is a tool as well. So it's like you see some black belts that have a chip on their shoulder and need a
Mm-hmm.
tap, need an ego boost. I'm not that guy. If you come in and tap me, cool.
Yeah.
Ultimately, my gym is about providing for my family and providing for the community. Um, you know, I think, and there's a lot of a lot of black belts that do this. Where you see it with Tap Out Cancer, where they do competitions where they're trying to benefit
Mm-hmm.
cancer research. I think just the motivation to do that as a black belt, not necessarily just compete. Which if that's your vibe, great. If you're providing money by going in there and competing, that's awesome. But just even the motivation to make that happen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, just in my gym alone, just with Nick and I wanting to do the type of outreach we're doing, we have people that are donating stuff to people that are in need. The hurricane or the tornado that we had in Elgin,
Mm-hmm.
our community jumped in pretty quick. So if that's what my black belt did for some other, like if that motivation did that, cool.
Yeah, I got you for sure. That's awesome. What is something you remember being really tough and that you had to overcome?
uh, so that's a good question. As far as like rolling, like an actual training, I would say getting my blue belt. I think it's kind of a normal thing in jiu-jitsu where getting your blue belt is kind of a rite of passage. You know what I mean? I've heard it said that you're training jiu-jitsu up until blue belt, and then you become a blue belt. After blue belt, you become a jiu-jitsu practitioner, right? So
Mm.
you're learning BJJ at white belt, and then you become a practitioner after blue belt. Especially because we're pretty stingy about handing out belts in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So I'd say the crucible. that I had to run where, and I think Alex does something very similar with his guys, where I had to show up. I had to, I had to show the fundamentals of of jujitsu to my instructor. And then after that, it was just like snake pitting. He got 3 or 4 people around that are above your level, and you were
Mm-hmm.
just rolling. You know what I mean? And it wasn't necessarily about winning each time. It was, they wanted to see if you're going to give up, and if you gave
Yeah.
up, you knew you gave up your blue belt. That's just what it was. So I think the blue belt for me was probably one of the biggest victories for me. I was at the time I was five. I'm still 5'10", but I weighed maybe 145, 150. So I was one of the smaller guys on the mats, and I was just getting. I remember this big old 6'2", like 195 brick house of a dude was just pasting my face to the mat, just like cross faces, and it was pretty horrible. I think another time that was pretty rough. It's more of a funny story. I used to train on the same team as Court McGee, who's a UFC veteran. And like one of the most horrifying moments of my life was having him take me down on the cage, have my knees pressed up against my ears, and I just see my gloves going through my legs. I was just like,
Yeah.
that was pretty horrifying. But I don't know. I don't necessarily think any of that. Anything was super hard in jiu-jitsu except showing up. I do deal with depression and anxiety. And honestly, the hardest victory to win sometimes being an introvert was actually just to show up. Once I got there
Mm-hmm.
and realized that someone tapped me and it wasn't that bad, and it that was fine afterwards. But actually getting on the mat, that was the hardest victory every time. I mean, I still deal with that today as an instructor and as a black belt. Getting and which is rough because I own a gym, like I have like I feel my anxiety as I'm driving into the parking lot. There's times where I'm just staring at the front door and I'm like, there's no way in hell I want to go in there, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the tool of jiu-jitsu for me, was just dealing with the fact that showing up is the hardest part.
Yeah. Well, I can agree with that. Definitely. It's
Yeah, you have anxiety.
yeah, sometimes I do. And like, especially when you're hurt or, you have all your aches and pains and it's like, do I really want to go in there and possibly get hurt even more? Or,
Yeah.
it's the whole depression, anxiety angle. And I think a
Yep.
lot of people probably struggle with that who are on the mats. And, but
Yeah.
I struggled
Yeah.
with
It's
it
like,
for a long time, especially at first.
yeah. Well, and it's like, once you get your endorphins going and stuff like that, there's times where I've gone in there and like an injury's gotten exacerbated. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, with my neck, but because I went in there and I got the endorphins, like natural Prozac, I
Yeah.
went out, I left feeling mentally better than I did physically.
Yeah.
I may have dropped a little bit in physical, but like, honestly, at this point in the game, I'd rather have mental clarity and feeling good about myself personally, then I can wake up and pop, like get hydrated, pop a couple ibuprofen, generally feel okay. But, especially with, and I can't say I'm an expert at this, but like just from the research that I've done, I'd rather have natural endorphins
Mm-hmm.
picking up my mood than being medicated. My wife notices that I feel better after a good roll, and
Oh, yeah.
that means a lot to me.
Definitely. Cool. I love the answers. Let's see. All right. So, who are some of your BJJ mentors?
I've actually had a ton of, as I said, I've kind of gone all over the place, and I've learned something specific, you know, each time.
Hmm.
The from Eddie, who is he got his brown belt right when I got there, and then I watched him get his black belt from Pedro. Um, from him, I just learned that an emphasis on fundamentals is so important. You look at a lot of the higher level matches and things like that. Um, even like I've had the benefit since we're part of the Henzo affiliation. You know, I've had the benefit from learning from Danaher as well. I've gone to a few of his classes, and you know, I would say, you know, I'm not trying to place anybody anywhere, but Eddie's had such an emphasis on the fundamentals, and then going to Danaher and seeing that what makes him great is the fact that most of his nuance, the stuff that makes his guys so good and made them world class, is the fact that he has an emphasis on fundamentals and fundamental practice.
Yeah.
I just thought that was amazing to see that Eddie was on that, and he may not have as much acclaim or be as good or as pushed as many people. The fact that that was similar was pretty awesome to me. What I learned from Paulo Brandao, who was a world champion, what I learned from him is just, I would say that his style probably affected my style the most, in the sense of like mentality of just, you know, he had a very strong passing style, but he also was, again, built like a brick house. And I had he was always so open to me modifying what I needed to, being just a different build, different weight class, and things like that. He helped me out a ton. Court McGee, working with him, being, you know, a UFC veteran, dude, his story is amazing. Going through AA recovery, like basically dying on the table from overdosing and things like that, to turning his life around, really affected my view on jiu-jitsu and training in general. Say what you want about the guy, but I think he was the one that embraced the tool of martial arts the best. He used martial arts to clean his life up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that about him. But you know, he's also one of the nicest guys ever. Dude, training with him is like a exercise in trying to escape out of a straitjacket. But afterwards, he's one of those guys that, like, he's helping you off the mats. He's never met a stranger. He's such a good dude. Daner is the Zabel. He's a 3rd-degree black belt under Pedro Sauer. Very, very close friends. We're like brothers. He's actually coming down to do a seminar at my gym in July.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm super excited for him to come down. Again, 3rd-degree black belt, one of the nicest guys ever, and he was the one that was just cool with putting himself in bad positions and seeing if he could work out of it, and then trying to get to a dominant position. I've seen him tap to things where you're like, did you really need to tap to that? And he was just like, you know, he's like, I'm learning, you know, but at the same time, he wouldn't take the tap away from the guy. There's a lot of times where I've seen people where they're like, oh, I was just working something new. And it's like, you know, he's a black belt. You get caught. It's just, It is what it is. So Daner's Zabel taught me a lot about humility, you know, being humble, and but also having enough self-confidence and just to be like, you know, I had an off day, and like, if you can't admit that you've had an off day, that's you.
Yeah.
I've got to train with Tim Kennedy a few times. He was the one that worked a lot of wall work at Gracie Umaita when I was there. That guy taught me just about the grind. Like, there's a few times where I wanted to get off the mats and puke, and he's like, "Oh, I need you." Like, he doesn't know me. He taught me. If he was there for a while. I was blessed enough to have him like train me on a few things. And then Alex, Alex did a lot for me in the sense of just getting like, he would not get in my way. And I'm not saying that, at this time when I was a brown belt, I didn't need anybody in my way. What I mean was, you start learning your instructor, your professor's kind of style and their system of approach after the fundamentals. But after a while, you need to start defining your own path. You know what I mean? I think that happens around mid to late blue belt and purple belt, obviously, because purple belt's kind of basically a black belt and other systems. He taught me a lot about just getting out of your student's way, and just like, after a while, you stop being a coach and and a instructor, and you become more of a mentor. I have, you're a purple belt at my gym now, and you're one of his purple belts. I try to do that with you. I have Nick and Taylor with me. They're obviously one of his purple belts, but they're, I've got to be blessed, and he's trusted me with giving them their stripes. I just got to give them their second stripe recently.
Awesome.
And so one of the things I try to do with them is what he did for me as a brown belt, which is just get out of their way. Like, when Nick or you or Taylor come up to me, I also have, another purple belt under me right now. If they come up to me, like they just need some detail work, I do what I can for them, or point them in the direction of who could. That's it. Those are all my mentors.
Cool.
I'm not unblessed.
Professor, has there been any times where you just puked like crazy after class?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us about that?
Recently, actually. Yeah, within like the last 6 months. I was helping another buddy of mine, a black belt, get ready for a competition, and this was right after COVID, so I full on was dad bodding pretty hard, and we had to go multiple rounds, and I was trying to help him out. And this guy's a machine. Like he's a Army officer trainer. That's what he does for a living. So the guy's just up tempoing all the time. And after our round, I was like, okay, give me 1 sec. I had to run and puke. Came in. Luckily, I had some breath mints. So I popped them. I was like, all right, let's go.
All right, Professor. What are some of your favorite submissions? And maybe we should break this down into gi and no gi for you. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not. I gave up the gi a while ago, but I don't dislike the gi. I started noticing there's a lot of gi players that they focus on gi. They don't know how to do basic pummeling practice, or they don't understand that they're already doing that. So when you put them in a drilling context, they've unlearned a lot of stuff. Where I don't see that in judo a ton. Like judo guys, I think because it's more wrestling based, stand up, you have to get into those positions a little bit more. Favorite submissions. You know what, man? I'll be honest with you. I don't know if people will agree. I love strangleholds. Being a smaller guy, I've had guys that were purple belts, but they're also like just muscular as hell. Just bicep curl me out of an arm bar. But you know what I mean? You can't outflex a choke.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of that. So I prefer those. I like a lot of that. I'm not like Gabe, who's got just sick armbar setups and finishes. That guy is just ridiculous with those. But I'd say my top 3 is rear naked choke, the guillotine, and I love me the cobra choke. And then I've been finding myself a lot. I've been a knee lock guy since I started. As soon as that's another thing Eddie was cool with before, I guess the time, back in 2004 and 5, you weren't allowed to do a lot of leg attacks, but he was cool with it. Brought in a lot of catch wrestling guys that had experience with some leg attacks. So I got to learn. I was really big on knee locks, still am. I love knee locks because you can, work into even the more modern setups of 411 and, backside 50-50. There's a knee lock there pretty much all the time. So I love me some knee locks. It's more position for me.
I've been a victim. Yeah, I think I've been a victim of your knee locks several times, and I'm like, what the heck?
It's lazy. I like being lazy.
Yes, lazy jiu-jitsu. I call my jiu-jitsu sometimes lazy jiu-jitsu just because I'm trying to conserve energy, and not like only busting out the hustle when I need to versus other people I've seen that are always on the hustle, and I'm like,
you got a great game that way. You really do. I like how patient you're. A very patient grappler. I like that. Yeah. You got to reserve that. Like right now, I was very impatient trying to grow this out. Look, you're more follically advanced than I am, and I think it's because you conserve your energy.
Could be, yeah. And I'm also lazy and I don't like shaving, so. All right, Professor. Do you have any advice for white belts?
Yeah, man. Like this part is kind of cliche, but a black belt's just a white belt that didn't quit. Um, I think I think a lot of times people come in, they have a notion of what they really want, but then they get caught up in what other people are doing, and they start doing that instead. So, for instance, as I was saying before, I have a 40-year-old that he's trying to do a holistic approach to his diabetes. I'm not saying he's not giving up on his insulin and stuff like that. What I'm saying is he came in. I advocate everybody to do at least one competition. I don't think it's necessary to always compete. I'm not saying that at all, but it's just for you to fully understand yourself in a fully stressed
Yeah.
environment. Competition's a good thing. I don't think it's something everybody needs to do all the time. And I asked him, I was like, hey, like we got a competition coming up. You've been training a lot. And he's like, you know what, man, I'm here to hang out with my son. We got a lot of father-son groups. He's like, I'm here to hang out with my son, get in shape, and hopefully get off of some of the medication I'm on. And that I value that fight, and I also respect the
Hmm.
fact that he didn't buy onto what other guys were doing.
Yeah.
So I would say it's always healthy to, if you need to redefine a goal, do it. But if you came in and your sole purpose was, after purple belt, for me, it was just to de-stress and deal with my anxiety and my depression. Who am I as a black belt to tell you that that's not a decent goal? My job is to show you jujitsu. My job is to give you opportunities to get it better. Um, and things like that. I teach people that just show up to do jujitsu differently than people that want to compete. And I don't do it in the same class. There's a reason why we
Hmm.
have competition classes at our gym rather than that. Like everybody's, and I tell my competitors, you treat everybody that walks in that door equally, even if they don't compete. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
definitely.
yeah. So I would just say define your motives. That was something I struggled with a lot until I just came to my conclusion myself that it's okay to be interested in what I want in jujitsu. So don't let anybody change that.
Yeah.
If you're there to lose weight, man. That's great. Make sure everything you do on the mats is to serve that purpose. You know what I mean? If you're coming in to compete, then everything you're doing on the mat is to serve that purpose. Be very purposeful with what you're doing, and then make adjustments. Expect road bumps. It's going to happen. You're going to get injured, or life's going to happen. It's okay. Life ain't over. Jiu-jitsu is always around.
For sure. It's interesting you said that. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is, as a white belt, I remember like seeing or hearing about this purple belt that quit. I was like, man, he made it to purple belt and he quit. Like, how is that possible? And now I'm a purple belt and I'm like, okay, I totally get it. Life gets
Yeah,
in.
yeah. It's a thing. I mean, that's when I got to, I think, second stripe blue belt, and I moved down to Texas, and it was just, my wife and I started this gymnastics program, and if anybody's ever started a business or something from scratch,
Yep.
you know, I just didn't have the time. Like, my wife and I were teaching every athlete, so from beginner all the way to advanced, which is very difficult in gymnastics. I'm not saying it's impossible. People do it all the time, but it takes up your life. You know what I mean? Um, even now, starting this business with Nick, we're business partners, but I'm dealing with it all the time. So as a white belt, coming in, you need to make sure you have the time, because you're going to feel bad if you can't show up. And then
Yep.
at blue belt, I ended up, when I started, going back to what I was just saying, I took 5 years off because I was building a program. I didn't know if I was, and finally my wife was like, okay, we got the time, and you're way too angsty for me. You need to go back to jujitsu. She's like, all right. So yeah, it happens. It happens all the time. Like I think, and I've noticed this even in my own gym. There's a statistic out there, I think, put out by like Jiu-Jitsu Times or whatever. 80% of white belts quit. Usually it's within the first couple of months. Then after that, it's like 60% of blue belts quit. And then they say once you're at purple belt, you don't really quit, but I've seen it happen. I'm not judging them for it either. Like, certain life things happen. I can't judge what you're doing with your life or where, like, I mean, you're insanely busy. You're one of the biggest guys. You're like, hey man, where can I come into your gym? You know what I mean? Like our rotations weren't meshing up. So, gas prices are a pain in the butt. It's one of those things where sometimes life asks you to take a break. It's not what you want.
Yeah. Forced break.
Yeah. And that kind of stuff happens, and luckily for us, you made the time to be able to make it in, and but you've had an insane last couple of years, so for you to come back in and start training, and you would bop in when you could, you'd jump into, Ellis's classes, you'd bop into coaches. It's what it is. You just try to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I that was one of the reasons why I was going to the Taylor open mats on Saturday, is because at the farmers market in Taylor, I could see the door to Concept Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from our like stall.
Really?
Little booth, yeah. And so I was
Beckoning.
finally asked my wife, hey, can I just, slip away for an hour and go do open mat?
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's
so it definitely was like you're saying, is just like a wherever I can sneak in and get a training session right now, kind of. So
Yeah. Well, and the nice thing was too is your wife had your back on that.
yeah,
Like
definitely.
that's important. If you're married or you're in a committed relationship, jujitsu is a time sink. I'm not saying it's not worth it. It's a time sink though. And there's and again, going back to the white belt thing is, um, there's times where it's going to require you to be away from your family and your loved ones, and of course your team, if you're doing it right, becomes a version of that, but
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't replace that. So again, you need to define your goals, and your community and your support system need to be behind it.
Yeah, you got to find the balance of your personal life and your jujitsu, like your gym
Yeah.
time. Or you want to say that? It's
Yep.
cool.
100, man. And
Well,
then,
do
like,
you?
I have a question for you. Is coming back after your break and all the stuff you're going through, and you're a family man at this point. What's it been like for you coming back?
It's been great, and it also has sucked because when I had to step away, I had really good cardio, and I was like, after every 6 minute round or whatever, I'd be busting out push-ups. I was getting ready to compete, like I was trying to stay in that mindset, and then I had to step away, and now I come back, and I'm like just getting creamed by everyone, and it's not a big deal. It just is kind of the mind. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to edit this part out. uh, I don't know. It's been great, but it's also just been a weird feeling because I hadn't really taken too many breaks. Like my breaks would be from injury. So after a
Yeah.
while, I'd still go in and just roll, but never go to my left side or whatever. And I've had
Right.
almost like sort of taken 2 years off, and it's just different now. I'm way older, like you're talking about. My body, it doesn't heal as fast anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and it's great, and I love coming in there with you guys. But also sometimes I'm like, man, this sucks.
Well, I've been in a similar situation, especially when I started coaching gymnastics full time. Because like I work at a Muay Thai gym that had jujitsu in it, so I was doing 2 classes a day. I was showing up. I was able to train a ton, uh, and I was in my 20s. And then when I came back, I was in my mid 30s. Right, so uh, that it was an adjustment. There was a lot of ego checking I had to do, and then I had to keep asking myself, what do I really want? Do I want to be
Yeah.
amazing at jujitsu and bad at my job, or do I want to be, amazing at my job and using jujitsu as a tool and just kind of accept where that lies? I think Tom DeBlas is one of my favorite jujitsu influencers on social media, because like he really and I'm saying this because I've been where you're at, like 100% been where you're at. And he's like, look, I treat my students differently, not in a bad way where it's like, I like you better. If you're competing, what he's saying is like, you show up to my gym and your fight is just to stay in the gym because, you're, farming and you're working and stuff like that. Then my goal is just to get your ass in the gym. If you're competing for me, I have standards that you have to meet, and it's not about your belt or it's just the fact that you're representing. You know what I mean? But he'll also say the guy showing up to lose weight represents me just as well as the guy that's trying to get gold medals for me. So I think, that helped me a lot. Like that helped me a lot in my, how can I say it? Like in my purple belt going brown belt, where it just made, I just had to be okay with being a hobbyist black belt. I want to be a good one. I want to be a good black belt. I don't want anybody to come into my gym and be like, that guy's not, a black belt or whatever. But at the same time, they don't know my history. They don't know my background. They don't know, you know what I mean? If that, and that's, when you're talking to me about, and I don't care if you use this part in it as well, but if, that's the thing is what with social media, there's a weird expectation. Now I was watching this guy who's a high level ADCC competitor, and he's saying, most black belts now suck. And it's like, bro, you're in your 20s. You're standing on the shoulders of so many people that weren't even getting paid to travel to compete on a national level, that didn't have the opportunity for sponsorships, that were working full time, that some of them even had families at the time. And for you to sit on the top like you are now, and again, this guy is amazing. I actually love his style. It's a beautiful style of jiu-jitsu and wrestling. And like, I love wrestle ups. Like this guy can wrestle up like nobody's business. I respect out of it, but you're also 20, you're also mid 20s, maybe pushing 30s, and the guys that you're talking about had to sacrifice more to make the industry that you're able to take advantage of. And you're doing it well, but don't knock the guy that's had to come up in a different way.
Yeah. Everyone's journey is different. That's kind of what this video cast or whatever this is called is about, really.
Yeah. Well, but that's what I was saying. It's like, jiu-jitsu is the tool, but the thing is like, just like any tool, as time progresses, a lot of it can get better, but then we lose that nuance of what made it great in the first place. You know what I mean? How can we look at a car right now? Like let's look at a NASCAR. We look at a NASCAR now that, can hit speeds of 200 miles an hour or whatever. Like, do you go back and you look at the first race car that could barely get 25 miles an hour and be like, that was a piece of crap? No, that was the pinnacle of technology. You know what I mean? Like, that's just what it was, So you don't look backwards and say, I'm better than that now. What it is you look back at that and be like, man, that's where we came from. And the heart and soul of that, where people sacrificed, because again, they weren't making a ton of money. They weren't doing it. Like the heart and soul to have the passion just to go out there and do it. That's amazing. My dad, God rest his soul, like he was a huge football fan, but even before the NFL got political, he stopped watching NFL because there was no passion in it. He'd watch college football because these kids were trying to do something and make them. So he's like, it's just way more entertaining to watch a college game than it is to watch the pros, because the pros can sit back. You know what I mean? They're making money.
Yeah. All right, Professor, do you have anything that you want to put out into the jiu-jitsu universe? Any ideas or thoughts that you have that we haven't discussed?
I guess I kind of just alluded to that. I don't know if, I think we need to be more open to other people's journeys. Like, I think it's really easy, especially for young guys coming in, and we put the expectation of our goal on ourselves, which is correct. You know what I mean? At my gym, I'm really big on, like, one of our rules, it's on the wall. One of our rules is respect your partner's goals as much as you respect yours. I think we come in there, and I've seen so many times where a competitor comes in, and he comes in and there's this middle-aged guy with 4 kids, and he's just trying to maintain weight and have a hobby. Like, he just needs to get out of his house, and he'll just go and maul the guy, and with no respect for the fact that that guy has a job to do. He has to get up in the morning the next day and get stuff done. And I'm not giving an excuse to train light. I'm not saying that at all. But you have to respect why the other person's there. And a competitor can learn as much from that middle-aged guy training in a different methodology than training hard with another competitor. You know, so there's, at our gym we do a lot of positional training. Like if that guy's not as good as you as a competitor, maybe put yourself, like, be like, hey man, no disrespect to you, I noticed that you need to work your mount more. Like you're giving up a lot of position on mount. Maybe I start with you mounted because I want to work out of it and things like that. There's a lot of stuff you can do that can improve that way. So I just think, especially with the advent of social media pushing this, like, look at me kind of syndrome, like it's about me and jiu-jitsu, like look at me, look how far I've gotten. And again, some of these, like, I'm not taking away from anybody's hard work, but at the same time, jiu-jitsu has the capacity to change someone's life in a different way, and I keep going back, to the fact that our gym has so many father-son groups, like it's a majority of it. How often in our generation have you seen where a son and a father can go and train something and have a hobby together? I think we're changing families this way. And for you, for you to judge that father to come in because he's not competing or rolling as great as you, man, he's there to hang out with his son, train hard with him or train smart. So you don't have to be a competitor to be successful at this stuff. And like, for anybody that says that your jiu-jitsu isn't good for the time you've been doing, like, your focus is different. So there's an ego check on both sides. You just got to make it happen.
Gotcha. Cool. That's definitely good advice.
Well, I'm glad you're part of the team and you've established it really well. Like, it's good stuff. Like, you train hard with the people that train hard, and you train well with the guys that aren't. That's something that we like. I mean, Nick and I, we don't tolerate mat bullies. It's not something we deal with.
We just for sure. All right, Professor. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Myself and the viewers really appreciate it. You taking time out of your weekend to spend with us for a little bit. Your answers were great and very encouraging, and you really brought value to the show. So thank you very much for that one.
Appreciate your time, man. It's good seeing you. I'll see you on the mat soon.
All right. That was Professor Micah Scarbrough. If you found value in this interview, hit that thumbs up button. Consider leaving some positive feedback in the comments section, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.